Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. My name is Daniel Harper, and until last Christmas Eve, I believed that a locked door meant safety. I believed that walls were boundaries and that snow, untouched and white, could not lie. I was wrong about all of it. It started the night the storm rolled in early. The weather report had promised light snow after midnight. Nothing serious, nothing memorable. But by 6 in the evening, the sky over my small town in northern Maine had turned the color of old bruises. The air felt heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. Christmas lights flickered along the street, their cheerful glow swallowed by thick, falling flakes. I lived alone in a narrow 2-story house at the edge of town, the kind of place people forget is there. Pine trees crowded the backyard, their branches sagging under the weight of snow. My nearest neighbor was half a mile away. On nights like that, the silence pressed against the windows. By 8 o'clock, the snow was falling hard. I checked the locks out of habit. Front door bolted, back door latched and chained, windows secured. I even checked the basement door, though I never used it in winter. Everything was sealed. Safe. I made myself dinner, turned on a classic Christmas movie, and tried to ignore the wind clawing at the house. Somewhere outside, something banged against the siding, a loose branch. I told myself nothing more. Around 10, the power flickered, just for a second, long enough to remind me how alone I was. When the lights came back, the house felt different. Colder, not in temperature, but in presence. That was when I heard the sound. Crunch. It was faint, distant, almost lost beneath the wind. I muted the television, listened. Another crunch followed. Slow, deliberate. Footsteps. I stood up, heart thudding. No one walked past my house. There was no sidewalk, no reason for anyone to be out there in a storm like this. I went to the front window and pulled back the curtain just enough to look. The porch light illuminated the snow in a soft yellow circle. At first, I saw nothing. Then my eyes adjusted. Footprints. They started at the edge of the porch light, emerging from the darkness beyond the yard. Deep impressions, as if whoever made them was heavy or carrying something. They moved straight toward my front door. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The footprints did not stop at the door. They continued right up to the threshold, and then they disappeared. I stared, confused. The snow on the porch was otherwise untouched. No sign of turning back, no trail leading away, just a clean line of prints that ended at my locked front door. I checked the lock again, still bolted, the chain secure, no scratches, no damage. I told myself it was an illusion. Snow played tricks on the eyes. Wind could blur things. Animals could make strange tracks, but these were not animal prints. They were boots, large, heavy, human. I stepped back from the window, suddenly aware of how thin the glass felt. The house creaked as the wind shifted. Somewhere inside the walls, something ticked, expanding and contracting with the cold. Then came the knock. It was soft, almost polite. 3 slow taps. I froze. No one spoke. No voice called my name. Just silence after the knock, thick and suffocating. I did not answer. Another knock followed, slightly firmer this time. My mind raced. Had someone followed the footprints inside before the storm worsened? I checked the windows again. No broken glass, no forced entry. The knock came a third time. This time, it was from inside the house, directly behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. The hallway was empty. The door at the end of it, the one that led to the basement, stood closed just as I had left it. The knocking stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing, no wind, no footsteps, just my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then I heard movement beneath the floorboards, slow, dragging, as if something heavy was being pulled across the basement floor. I backed away, every instinct screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The windows were sealed, the doors locked. The snow outside was deep enough to trap me. Another sound followed, breathing, not mine. It came from the walls, deep, ragged, patient. I stood there, shaking, as the house seemed to breathe with it. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Whatever had left those footprints in the snow had never come from outside. It had been waiting inside my locked house all along. I did not sleep that night. I stood in the living room until dawn. Every light in the house turned on, every door locked, my back pressed against the wall as if the house itself might lunge at me if I let my guard down. The breathing stopped sometime after midnight. The dragging sound beneath the floorboards faded into silence. Nothing else happened. That quiet was worse than the noise. It felt intentional, as if whatever was inside the house was waiting for me to make the first mistake. When the sky finally began to lighten, I forced myself to move. My legs felt weak, unsteady, like I had just woken from a long illness. I grabbed the fireplace poker and walked slowly through each room. Living room, empty. Kitchen, empty. Bathroom, empty. Every space looked exactly as I had left it. No overturned furniture, no marks on the walls, no sign that anything had moved. Then I reached the basement door. The chain was still in place. The lock was untouched, but the door itself was cold in a way the rest of the house was not. When I placed my palm against the wood, it felt damp, almost as if it were breathing out cold air. I did not open it. Instead, I went back to the front door. The storm had ended. Snow lay smooth and untouched across the yard, sparkling faintly in the gray morning light. Except for one thing, the footprints were still there. They had not filled in overnight. The wind had not erased them. They remained as sharp and deep as they had been the night before. And now I could see something I had missed. There were no footprints leading to them. They began in the middle of my yard. I stepped outside, the cold biting through my boots. I followed the trail slowly, heart pounding, until I reached the point where they first appeared. Nothing, no disturbance, no broken snow, just a sudden, impossible beginning. I backed away and locked the door again, my hands shaking. I called the police. The dispatcher listened patiently as I tried to explain. Footprints that led into my locked house, knocking from inside, sounds beneath the floor. There was a pause on the line. She asked if I had been drinking. I told her no. Another pause. She said an officer would be sent to check things out. It took 40 minutes. By the time Officer Michael Reeves arrived, the footprints had begun to soften slightly in the rising sun. He was calm, professional, clearly tired. Christmas Eve calls were never pleasant. He walked the yard with me, crouched to examine the prints. Boots, he said, large size. Probably a prank. I told him there was no trail leading away. He frowned, walked the perimeter again, then shrugged. Snow does strange things, he said, inside the house. He checked every room, even the basement. I stood at the top of the stairs while he went down, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing, he called up. Old pipes, probably animals, but his voice was tighter than before. Before he left, he paused at the front door. "You sure you were alone last night?" I nodded. He handed me his card. "If anything else happens, call." That afternoon, I tried to convince myself it was over. Stress, isolation, a bad night. I cleaned the house. I cooked a proper meal. I even wrapped the last of my Christmas gifts. As evening fell, snow began again. Light at first, gentle. By nightfall, the yard was white once more. I watched from the window as the old footprints vanished beneath the new snow. Relief washed over me. Then I noticed the new ones forming. One step, then another, appearing in real time. Each print pressed down into the snow as if made by an invisible weight. They started at the front door, and they were leading away toward the trees. I heard a sound behind me, the soft scrape of a door opening. From the basement, I stood frozen at the top of the basement stairs, staring at the darkness where the door had opened on its own. The air drifting up from below smelled old and wet, like earth that had not seen sunlight in years. I could hear nothing now. No footsteps, no breathing, just silence so heavy it rang in my ears. I did not go down. I slammed the basement door shut and shoved a chair beneath the handle, my hands shaking so badly I could barely move. The sound echoed through the house, louder than it should have been, as if the walls themselves were listening. For a long time, nothing happened. I stayed there until my legs ached, waiting for another sound, another sign that I was not alone. When none came, exhaustion finally overtook fear. I retreated to the living room couch, the fireplace poker still clutched in my hands, and sat with my back against the wall until my eyes closed. I dreamed of snow, endless white fields stretching under a black sky, footprints appearing ahead of me, one by one, forming a path I could not avoid. Every time I tried to stop, my feet kept moving, following the trail whether I wanted to or not. I woke with a jolt. The house was dark. For a moment, I did not understand where I was. Then memory rushed back, sharp and cold. I checked my watch, 3:17 in the morning, Christmas Eve. The storm had returned. Wind howled outside, rattling the windows like something trying to get in or out. Then I noticed the smell, damp earth, stronger than before. I sat up slowly. The chair I had wedged under the basement door was lying on its side in the hallway. The door was open. I did not scream. I could not. Fear had hollowed me out, leaving only a tight pressure in my chest. I stood, every movement deliberate, and backed toward the front door. Something shifted below. A slow, careful step, then another, the sound of boots on concrete. I ran. I yanked open the front door and burst into the snow. The cold hit me like a wall, stealing my breath. I did not stop. I ran across the yard, slipping, falling, scrambling back to my feet. The woods loomed ahead, dark and dense. That was when I realized I was following the footprints. They stretched from my front door toward the trees, clear and deep, waiting for me. I tried to veer away, but my feet slid back into the path, as if the snow itself guided me. Behind me, the house groaned. I heard something step onto the porch, heavy, patient. I forced myself off the trail and plunged into untouched snow, dragging myself sideways until my legs burned. I fell behind a tree and pressed myself against the trunk, gasping. The footprints stopped where I had left them. They did not follow. I waited, shivering, until my teeth chattered uncontrollably. Minutes passed, then more. Nothing emerged from the house. Eventually, I crept back. The front door stood open. Inside, the house felt wrong, not invaded, but emptied, as if something essential had been removed. I noticed it in small ways at first. The family photos on the wall were different. Where there had once been pictures of my parents, my sister, myself as a child, there were now empty frames. My name was missing from my mail. My reflection in the hallway mirror lagged behind me by a fraction of a second. I checked my phone. No signal, no messages, no contacts, as if I had never existed. The basement door was closed again. The chair was back where it belonged, upright and untouched. I stood in the middle of my living room, heart racing, and understood something with terrible clarity. The footprints were not trying to lead me out. They were trying to show me where I belonged. And the longer I stayed inside that house, the less of me there was left to leave. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve trying to prove that I still existed. That sounds ridiculous written down, but when your own name vanishes from your mail and your face hesitates to acknowledge you in the mirror, logic becomes fragile. I said my name out loud again and again. Daniel Harper. The sound felt wrong in my mouth, like a word borrowed from someone else. I checked my wallet. My driver's license was there, but the photo looked faded, as if it had been left too long in the sun. The name was smudged, the letters thinning at the edges. I blinked hard, but it did not change. I tried calling my sister. The phone rang once, twice, then it stopped. No voicemail, no error message, just silence, as if the call had never been placed. I told myself I was panicking. That stress could warp perception. That exhaustion could do terrible things to the mind. But deep down, I knew the truth was simpler and far more terrifying. The house was taking me apart. By noon, the snow had started again. Heavy, relentless. It erased the world beyond my windows until there was nothing but white and gray. The trees disappeared. The road vanished. The house stood alone in a blank landscape. I tried to leave. I packed a bag with whatever felt important. Wallet, phone, keys, a jacket. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The moment my boots touched the snow, a wave of dizziness hit me. The world tilted. my vision blurred. Footprints appeared in front of me, fresh, deep. They led straight back inside. I staggered away from them, fighting nausea, but my legs grew weak with every step I took in the wrong direction. It felt like trying to walk against a powerful current. When I stepped into the footprints, the dizziness eased. I slammed the door shut and collapsed against it, shaking. The house did not want me to leave. As evening approached, the temperature inside dropped. Frost crept along the edges of the windows, tracing delicate patterns that looked almost like writing. I leaned closer, heart pounding. The shapes resembled letters, not words I recognized. Not quite. They shifted when I tried to focus, rearranging themselves into something just beyond comprehension. A message meant for something that was no longer entirely human. I retreated to the living room and turned on every lamp. The glow felt weak, swallowed by shadows that seemed thicker than before. That was when I noticed the sound. A faint scraping, not beneath the floor this time, inside the walls. It moved slowly, deliberately, circling the room. I followed it with my eyes, watching the shadows swell and contract as if something were pressing from the other side. I pressed my ear to the wall, breathing, close enough to feel. I pulled back with a gasp. "You belong here." The words were not spoken aloud, yet they echoed inside my skull with terrible clarity. I covered my ears, but it did not help. "The house knows your shape now," I screamed then. I could not stop myself. The sound tore out of me, raw and desperate. The walls seemed to absorb it, the vibrations fading too quickly. The whisper returned, calm and patient. "We are making room." I fled to the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the shower as hot as it would go, steam filling the small space. I stared at my reflection through the fogged mirror. My face looked thinner, paler. The lines around my eyes were deeper. I wiped the glass. For a moment, my reflection did not move. It just stared back at me, eyes empty, lips slightly parted as if listening. Then it smiled, not my smile. I stumbled back, slipping on the wet floor. When I looked again, the mirror showed only me, terrified, alone, or so I hoped. Night fell early. Christmas lights flickered weakly, some of them dark now, as if the house was rationing power. I curled up on the couch, clutching the fireplace poker like a talisman. Every creak made me flinch. Then came the footsteps, not outside, above me. Slow, heavy steps crossing the ceiling of the living room. I stared upward, breath held. I did not have an upstairs. The footsteps paced back and forth, testing the space, learning it. Snow began to fall from the ceiling. Fine white dust drifted down, melting as it touched my skin. Footprints appeared overhead, pressing down from above, claiming a floor that should not exist. And I understood the final truth of that night. The house was no longer containing the thing in the snow. The house was becoming it. By Christmas morning, time had begun to fracture. I know that sounds impossible, but inside that house, hours showers no longer flowed in a straight line. They folded back on themselves, stretched thin, then snapped without warning. I would glance at the clock and watch the second hand tremble, shuddering as if unsure which direction it was supposed to move. I stopped trusting it. Sleep came in brief, violent bursts. Each time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of the same thing. The house standing alone in an endless field of snow. No sky, no horizon, just white swallowing everything. Footprints crisscrossed the ground in every direction, overlapping and tangled, like veins in a living body, and every set of footprints was mine. I woke from those dreams gasping, my heart racing, my body soaked in sweat despite the cold. Each time I woke, something else in the house had changed. The furniture shifted slightly, never enough to notice all at once. The couch angled toward the basement door. The chairs faced the hallway. Even the Christmas tree leaned subtly inward, its ornaments clinking softly as if whispering to one another. Watching, learning. By midday, hunger drove me into the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed weakly, its interior light flickering. Inside, the food looked wrong. Bread crusted with frost, milk separated into thick gray layers, meat darkened and shriveled, as if it had aged decades overnight. I slammed the door shut, nausea rising. I tried the radio. Static. I tried the television. Static. I tried my phone again, hoping against reason. No signal, but something new had appeared. A notification, one missed call. No number, no timestamp, just a single line of text beneath it. Come home. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I was home, or at least I thought I was. The sound of footsteps returned shortly after, not above me, not beneath me, beside me. Soft impressions formed in the carpet, pressing down fibers one step at a time. I backed away, my heel catching on the edge of the rug, sending me stumbling. The footprints followed, always just out of sight. I ran to the front door again. Desperation, overwhelming fear. I unlocked it and threw it open. The world outside was gone. Where my yard had been was now an endless white expanse, stretching infinitely in all directions. No trees, no road, no sky, just snow and footprints, thousands of them. They moved constantly, appearing and fading, circling the house in complex patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Some were deep and heavy, others shallow and small. Some walked upright, some did not. I screamed into the void. The sound swallowed instantly. The door slammed shut behind me. I was back in the living room. The house felt pleased. The whisper returned, stronger now, layered with countless voices speaking in unison. You are nearly ready. I covered my ears and sank to my knees. Ready for what? The walls answered. To finish the path, images flooded my mind without warning. Memories that were not mine. People stepping into houses like mine across decades and centuries. Snowstorms, locked doors, footprints leading inward. None of them left, their faces blurred together, identities dissolving into the structure itself. Their fear lingered, soaked into the walls like moisture. I understood then, the house was not unique. It was a node, a place where the boundary between inside and outside broke down completely, where paths that should lead away instead folded back inward, where people were converted into passageways. I felt something shift inside my chest, a strange hollowing sensation, as if a door had opened where my heart should be. My memories began to slip. My childhood bedroom gone, my sister's laugh fading. Even my own voice sounded unfamiliar when I screamed. The house responded instantly. Footprints appeared across the ceiling again, heavier than before. Cracks formed in the plaster as weight pressed down from above. Snow fell like ash. The basement door creaked open slowly. Darkness spilled upward, thick and textured, crawling along the floor like fog. I crawled backward until my spine hit the wall. "This is where you started," the whisper said. "This is where you end." I looked down at my hands. They were pale, translucent. The veins beneath my skin formed patterns that looked disturbingly like footprints branching outward. I laughed then, not because it was funny, because it was inevitable. The house had never wanted my body. It wanted my direction, my purpose, my ability to lead something else inside. The front door unlocked itself. Outside, the snow waited, and somewhere far away, someone else was already following the trail. I do not remember deciding to stay. I remember standing near the front door, staring at the handle as snow light spilled through the glass. I remember the feeling in my chest settling into something heavy and calm, like a verdict had been reached without my consent. The door closed on its own. The sound was gentle, final. From that moment on, the house stopped resisting me. It stopped testing me. Instead, it began to teach. The first lesson was silence. The whispers faded. The footsteps ceased. Even the constant creaking of wood and pipes softened, until the house felt almost peaceful. I moved through the rooms without fear, touching the walls, the furniture, the familiar shapes that now felt newly claimed. When I pressed my palm against the wall, I felt a pulse, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. I should have panicked. Instead, I felt a strange comfort. The fear that had hollowed me out was being replaced by something else. Purpose. Outside, the snow no longer fell. It simply existed, suspended in a timeless white field beyond the windows. The world had narrowed to the house and what it needed. And what it needed was paths. I began to see them everywhere. Faint impressions appeared across the floors, subtle depressions in the wood and carpet that vanished if I stared too long. They did not belong to me anymore. They were instructions. When I followed them, the house responded. Lights warmed. The air grew easier to breathe. When I ignored them, the walls tightened. The ceiling lowered just enough to make me feel watched. I learned quickly. The second lesson was memory. The house fed on it. At first, it took small things, songs I used to know the words to, the names of streets in my hometown, faces of people I had not thought about in years. Each memory faded gently, like snow melting in sunlight. In return, I was given others, images of different houses, different winters, different storms. I saw men and women standing where I now stood, confusion on their faces as footprints formed around them. I felt their fear, their resistance, their eventual understanding. They had all reached this point. They had all become useful. The third lesson was movement. The house showed me how to open itself without opening doors, how to stretch its interior into places that should not connect. The hallway grew longer when I walked it. The basement stairs descended deeper than before, leading to rooms filled with packed snow that did not melt. I left footprints there, not with my feet, with my presence. I understood then that the house was not fixed in one place. It intersected with many places, many winters, many lives. It was a crossing, and I was becoming one of its signs. On what I think was the second night of Christmas, the house brought me my first visitor. I heard the sound before I saw it. A knock, soft, uncertain. From outside, the front door glass fogged with breath. A shape stood beyond it, barely visible through frost and snow. A person wrapped in a heavy coat, shoulders hunched against the cold. Hope flared inside me, real and painful. I rushed to the door, my hand hovering over the lock. The house pulsed. Images flooded my mind. The path, the cycle, the hunger beneath the walls. I understood what the house wanted. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and alive. The person outside looked up, relief flooding their face. "Thank God," they said. I thought no one lived here. Their voice sounded so human it hurt. They stepped inside. The door closed behind them. The house breathed. Snow did not follow them in. It stopped at the threshold, as if respecting an old rule. The visitor looked around, confused. "Your place is strange," they said. I nodded. I watched as faint footprints formed behind them on the floor, deeper with every step they took. They did not notice. The house was already learning their shape. I felt something settle into alignment inside me. The final lesson arrived without warning. I was not trapped here. I was anchored. The house did not need me forever. It needed me long enough to guide others inside, to show them the path when the snow erased everything else. Outside, the white world shifted. Somewhere far away, another storm was forming, and when it arrived, the footprints would appear. I would be ready to answer the knock. The visitor stayed longer than they should have. At first, they sat in the living room, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee the house had somehow provided. Steam rose, though the liquid inside never cooled. They introduced themselves as Laura Bennett. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Exhaustion and relief woven tightly together. She had been driving for hours. She said, "A sudden storm. The road vanished. Her phone lost signal. Then she saw my porch light glowing through the snow. A miracle." I nodded at the right moments. I said the things a normal person would say. "You are safe now. The storm will pass. You can rest here." The house approved. I felt it in the warmth spreading through the walls, the way the shadows softened. Laura relaxed, shoulders lowering, breath evening out. Footprints deepened behind her chair. I tried not to look at them. The house had taught me many things, but it had not taught me how to ignore guilt. out. Laura slept on the couch that night. I took the chair across from her, watching her chest rise and fall. The Christmas lights blinked slowly, counting something only the house understood. I told myself I would let her leave in the morning. I told myself many lies. At dawn, the house woke before we did. The sound of footsteps echoed softly through the hallway, measured and slow. Laura stirred, frowning in her sleep. "Did you hear that?" she asked, sitting up. "Probably the pipes," I said. The words tasted hollow. She followed the sound despite my protests. We stood at the end of the hallway together, staring at the basement door. It was open. The stairs beyond were coated in fresh snow. Laura laughed nervously. "This is some kind of joke, right?" I said nothing. The house pressed against me, urging patience. Laura took the first step. Her footprint sank deep into the snow on the stair. The house shuddered. She froze. "What is this place?" Her voice cracked. The answer rose unbidden in my mind, shaped by countless borrowed memories. "This is where roads end." She turned to run. The hallway stretched. The front door was farther away than it had ever been. Footprints appeared ahead of her, guiding her path whether she wanted them to or not. She stumbled, slipped, screamed as the snow deepened beneath her feet. I stood still. The house needed to know if I would interfere. Laura reached the front door and yanked at the handle. "Locked!" She pounded on the glass, sobbing, begging me to help her. I took a step forward. The walls tightened, the ceiling lowered. A warning. I stopped. The house relaxed. Laura slid down the door, curling into herself, breath coming in ragged bursts. The footprints gathered around her, overlapping, encircling. I felt something inside me harden. I knelt beside her. "I am sorry," I whispered. She looked up at me, eyes wide with betrayal and terror. "Why are you doing this?" I searched for the answer. "Because it will not let me stop." That was not entirely true. The house did not force me. It only rewarded obedience. Laura screamed when the floor beneath her softened, snow giving way to darkness. She fell through with a sound I will never forget. The house sealed the opening instantly. Silence returned. The footprints remained. I sat alone for a long time, staring at the place where Laura had been. The house pulsed. Content. Something new appeared on the wall. A mark, a symbol formed from frost and shadow. It felt like a tally. I understood. Laura was not the first I had guided inside. She would not be the last. That night, I dreamed of roads again. This time, I stood at the edge of many of them, pointing the way, and far away, under a different storm, someone saw a light in the snow and changed direction. After Laura disappeared, the house changed its behavior toward me, not warmer, not kinder, more deliberate. The silence that followed her death was absolute. No creaking pipes, no whispering walls. Even the ticking clock I no longer trusted had stopped entirely. Time inside the house did not just fracture anymore. It waited. I cleaned the living room where she had slept. I scrubbed the floor until my hands were raw, until the wood gleamed and showed no sign of what had happened. The footprints vanished easily. too easily. The house did not want evidence. That night, the mark on the wall grew. It was subtle at first, a faint extension of frost lines branching outward like veins. When I blinked, I thought it had receded. When I looked again, it had grown longer. Counting, I tried to sleep in my bedroom for the first time since the storm began. The bed felt unfamiliar, as if someone else had been using it. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to my own breathing. Another breath answered, not from beside me, from beneath the bed. I slid off the mattress slowly and looked. There was nothing there, but the dust on the floor was disturbed, forming shallow impressions that shifted as I watched. Footprints without weight, memory of movement. I slept on the couch after that. The next visitor arrived sooner than I expected. There was no knock this time. I saw him through the window. A man stood at the edge of the yard, snow whipping around him, staring directly at the house. He did not move. He did not call out. He waited. I recognized that posture immediately. He was listening for permission. The house thrummed with anticipation. I opened the door before I could talk myself out of it. The man staggered forward, relief breaking across his face. His name was Thomas Reed. He had been hiking. A storm rolled in faster than forecast. His GPS failed. The usual story. But there was something different about him. He did not step fully inside. He hesitated at the threshold, eyes scanning the floor. "You got some weird tracks here," he said. My stomach dropped. He could see them, not clearly, just enough to sense something was wrong. The house did not like that. The air thickened. The door creaked. I smiled and waved him in. The footprints deepened instantly, pressing hard against the floor as if offended. Thomas stepped back. "Nope," he said. "Sorry, this place feels wrong." He turned to leave. The house reacted violently. The yard beyond the door collapsed inward, snow folding like fabric, revealing darkness beneath. The road vanished. The trees twisted away from their roots. Thomas screamed as the world rearranged itself. I grabbed his arm. For a moment, we were both suspended between inside and outside. I felt the house pull. I felt something else pull back. Choice. I let go. Thomas fell backward into the snow, scrambling, crawling away as the world snapped back into place. The yard returned. The trees straightened. The door slammed shut. The house roared, not audibly, internally. The walls vibrated. The floor rippled. The ceiling cracked. Pain lanced through my chest. I collapsed, gasping as images flooded my mind. Houses burning, snow burying roads, footprints leading inward across countless winters. Punishment. I had broken the rule. The house did not need me obedient. It needed me aligned. I woke hours later on the living room floor. The mark on the wall had changed shape. It was no longer a tally. It was a warning. I understood then. I could resist. Once, maybe twice. But every refusal weakened me and strengthened the house. That night, the footsteps returned. Hundreds of them. They crossed the ceiling, the walls, the air itself. Invisible travelers pacing impatiently, waiting for paths to open. I stood at the center of the living room, shaking. The house whispered softly, "Do not hesitate again." Outside, the storm intensified. Somewhere in the white distance, someone else was already walking toward the light. After I let Thomas escape, The house stopped pretending I was necessary. For a long time, I lay on the living room floor, staring at the ceiling as unseen footsteps crossed it endlessly. The pain in my chest had faded into a dull ache, but something deeper had been damaged, a connection strained almost to breaking. The house was angry, not in a human way. There was no rage, no sudden violence. Instead, there was pressure, expectation, the certainty that I would correct my mistake. I tried to stand. My legs buckled. Footprints appeared beside me, shallow but insistent, forming a path toward the hallway. I ignored them. The temperature dropped instantly. Frost crept across the walls, racing along corners and seams. My breath fogged the air. The house was tightening its grip. I forced myself upright and stumbled in the opposite direction. The front door. If I could leave, even for a moment, maybe the connection would weaken, maybe distance still mattered. The handle was ice cold. When I pulled, it did not budge. Behind me, the footprints deepened, darkening as if filled with shadow. They no longer asked. They commanded. I screamed and ran upstairs, heart pounding. The staircase lengthened beneath my feet, each step heavier than the last. The second floor hallway stretched impossibly long, doors drifting farther apart as I moved. I reached my bedroom at last and slammed the door shut. The room felt smaller than I remembered. The walls leaned inward. The window showed nothing but white, an endless snowfield pressed flat against the glass. Then the door opened, not violently, carefully. The house had learned restraint. Someone stood in the doorway. It was me. The figure wore my face, my clothes, my expression of exhausted fear. But its eyes were wrong. Too still, too empty. You are out of alignment, it said in my voice. I backed away until my spine hit the wall. What are you? The copy tilted its head. I am what remains when you refuse. It stepped forward. Footprints formed beneath its feet, darker and deeper than any I had seen before. They sank into the carpet as if it were snow. You were chosen because you hesitated. It continued. Because you could still see the door and doubt yourself. I shook my head. I will not do this anymore. The copy smiled. Then you will be replaced. The room lurched. The walls peeled back like paper, revealing layers of other rooms beyond them. Other houses, other winters. I glimpsed people frozen in moments of terror as footprints formed around them. The network, the house was not one place. It was many. The copy lunged. I dodged instinctively, the movement sending a sharp pain through my side. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and swung. It passed through the copy as if striking smoke, but the impact rippled outward. The house shuddered. For the first time since the storm began, the footprints faltered. I ran. The hallway twisted violently, doors slamming open and shut as I passed. I burst into the living room and skidded to a stop. The front door stood wide open. Outside, the snowstorm churned violently, but I could see the road, the trees, reality. Hope surged. Footprints raced toward the door from every direction, converging, trying to block the path. I sprinted. The copy appeared beside me, keeping pace effortlessly. You cannot leave, it said calmly. You are part of the structure now. I reached the threshold. The cold hit me like fire. I stepped outside for one glorious second. Nothing stopped me. Then the ground gave way. Snow collapsed beneath my feet, opening into a vast white void filled with countless overlapping footprints, all leading inward. I fell. The door slammed shut above me. I landed hard on packed snow, gasping. Around me stood shapes half-formed from shadow and frost, human outlines without faces. The guides. They watched silently. I understood the final cruelty. Escape was possible, but only deeper inside. Above me, the house loomed, larger than before, its windows glowing softly like eyes. The copy stepped to the edge and looked down. When you are ready to align again, it said, follow the path. Footprints formed at my feet, leading away. I screamed into the endless white as the first step pressed itself into the snow somewhere far above. The house waited. I walked. There was no other option. The footprints led away from the place where I had fallen, cutting a clean path through the endless white. Each step I took felt both chosen and forced, as if my body remembered something my mind was still resisting. The void around me was silent. No wind, no storm, just snow packed hard beneath my feet and a pale sky with no sun. I looked back once. The house was gone, or maybe it had never been above me at all. Ahead, the footprints multiplied, branching off into countless directions. Some were faint, almost erased. Others were deep and sharp, freshly made. They crossed and recrossed like a map drawn by madness. I understood where I was, not inside the house, inside what the house used. The crossing. As I walked, shapes began to rise from the snow. Not structures exactly, but impressions of them. Half-formed houses emerged, their walls suggested by shadow and frost. Windows flickered briefly with light before fading. Memories. Each structure carried the weight of someone who had come before me. I could feel their fear pressed into the snow like fingerprints. I passed a small cabin buried to its roofline. A set of footprints led into it. None led out. I passed a narrow apartment building standing impossibly alone in the white. Its door hung open, darkness spilling out. The footprints converged there, thick as veins. I kept moving. The guides appeared shortly after. They rose from the snow without sound, human in outline but wrong in every detail. Their faces were smooth, unfinished, as if memory itself had worn them away. They did not walk. They glided. They surrounded me at a careful distance. You resisted, one of them said. The voice came from everywhere. I did. That is why you are here and not gone. I asked them what this place was. They showed me instead. The ground beneath my feet shifted. Snow peeled back to reveal layers beneath, each one a different winter, different footprints, different storms frozen in time. This is the path beneath paths, the guide said, the place where directions are decided. The house is only a door. I thought of the copy wearing my face. What happens to those who refuse completely? The guides paused. They are simplified. I did not like the sound of that. We walked together for a long time. Time had no meaning here, but distance did. With every step, I felt something being stripped away. My name, my age, my fear. When we stopped, we stood before a shape larger than any house I had seen. A convergence. Dozens of structures overlapped, their forms bleeding into one another. Doors opened into other doors. Windows looked out onto snowfields that should not exist. At its center stood a single threshold, the original door. This is where alignment is corrected, the guides said. I felt the pull immediately. The same force that had dragged me back into the house now urged me forward. I asked them if I would survive. They did not answer. Footprints formed ahead of me, deeper than any before. Mine. I stepped toward the door. As my hand touched the handle, I felt memories rush back. Laura, Thomas, the copy, the lives bent and broken by this system. I hesitated. The door trembled. Behind me, the guides waited. I realized the truth then. This place did not exist to trap people. It existed to recycle them, to grind choice into direction. I pulled my hand back. The footprints faltered. For the first time, the white sky darkened. Something unseen shifted its attention toward me. The path beneath my feet cracked, and far away, I heard the house calling my name. Daniel. I ran. Running in the crossing was nothing like running in the real world. There was no ground in the way I understood it. The snow shifted beneath my feet, sometimes solid, sometimes sinking just enough to slow me down. Each step rewrote the path behind me, erasing and redrawing footprints as if the crossing itself were uncertain which direction I should go. The sky above darkened further, bruised shades spreading outward from a point I could not see. I felt watched, not by eyes, but by intention. The guides followed. They did not chase me. They did not need to. Wherever I ran, footprints appeared ahead of me, subtly steering my movement. When I tried to veer off, the snow softened, swallowing my ankles until I corrected course. This was not punishment. This was correction. I realized then that the house had never been the jailer. I had. My willingness to follow had done the real work. I stopped. The guides halted with me, forming a loose circle. Their faceless forms reflected nothing, like mirrors that refused to show an image. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. A pause. "You asked the wrong question," one replied. They gestured outward. The snow parted, revealing a memory not my own. A woman stood on a porch decades ago, snow falling gently around her. She stared at a set of footprints leading inside her home. Her door was locked. She hesitated. Then she followed. The scene shifted. A man in another time, another storm, a different house, the same choice. Again and again, people were not taken. They volunteered. The crossing amplified that choice until it became permanent. "You think you are resisting," the guide said, "but you are still choosing paths." I clenched my fists. "Then show me another option." The guides were silent for a long time. When they spoke again, their voices carried weight. "There is one." The snow beneath us rippled violently. Far away, something immense shifted, as if a sleeper had turned in its rest. To refuse direction entirely is to erase yourself from the path. I felt a chill deeper than cold. What does that mean? It means no footprints, no memory, no return. I thought of Laura, of Thomas, of the copy wearing my face, of every person whose hesitation had fed the system. If I disappeared, the house would simply find another guide. Would it? I asked the question aloud. The guides did not answer. Instead, the snow around us changed shape, forming a wide, empty circle. No footprints formed within it. The absence was unsettling, like silence after a scream. "Step there," one guide said, "and you will no longer belong to any path." I hesitated. Fear surged, raw and animal. To be erased was worse than death. At least death left a mark, a memory. The house called my name again, distant but insistent. "Daniel." I stepped back from the circle. The guides inclined their heads. "You are not ready." The snow surged, closing the gap. Footprints formed again, firm and undeniable. Leading away, I was being moved, carried by direction I no longer chose. Ahead, shapes rose from the white. Houses, many of them, all familiar. Each one was mine. The same narrow two-story structure repeated endlessly, stretching across the crossing like a disease. Every door was open, every window glowed. The house had adapted. If I would not return to it, it would bring itself to me. And somewhere within that infinite repetition, I knew my copy was waiting, smiling, aligned. The path bent sharply toward the nearest door. Footprints deepened, and despite everything, my feet followed. The houses did not stand still as I was pulled toward the nearest open door. The identical structures shifted around me like pieces on a board. Some drifted closer, others slid away into the white. The effect was nauseating, as if space itself were breathing. The footprints beneath my feet grew heavier with every step. They pressed deep into the snow, anchoring me to a direction I no longer chose. I tried to slow down. My body ignored me. The first door loomed ahead. It was my front door. The same chipped paint, the same faint scratch near the handle from when I had locked myself out years ago. Even the porch light flickered with the same tired rhythm. I crossed the threshold. The interior was wrong. Not destroyed, not altered. Reset. The furniture stood in familiar places but looked unused, as if the house had been staged rather than lived in. The air smelled clean, empty. The Christmas decorations were present but pristine, like props awaiting an audience. Footprints formed behind me and vanished instantly. The door closed. I knew without looking that the crossing had withdrawn. I was back inside a house, maybe the house, or one of many. "Hello, Daniel." The voice came from the living room. My copy stood beside the Christmas tree, adjusting an ornament with careful precision. He looked healthier than me, rested. His movements were calm and economical, free of hesitation. "You came back," he said pleasantly. I did not answer. He turned and smiled. "I knew you would." The house hummed softly, approving. This is where alignment completes. My copy continued. where you stop pulling against the direction and let it carry you. I glanced toward the hallway. It was shorter than it should have been. The house was compressing. You let Thomas go. The copy said. You hesitated again with the guides. Each time you weaken the structure. Good, I said. He shook his head. No. Each time you weaken yourself. The lights dimmed slightly. I felt pressure behind my eyes. A subtle push inward. Memories stirred, threatening to rearrange themselves. You think resistance is freedom, the copy said, but freedom is simply choosing the correct path sooner. I stepped backward. Footprints appeared ahead of me, blocking the way. The copy approached slowly. Look around, he said. No screaming walls, no collapsing floors. This is mercy, I laughed. It sounded thin. You call this mercy? He gestured around us. You are no longer afraid. The house does not need to hurt you. It only needs you to function. I thought of Laura, of the empty place she had left behind. Functioning, I said, means feeding it. The copy did not deny it. Yes, the word echoed. The house surged with warmth. You could help so many, he continued. Lost people. Confused people, you can give them purpose. I felt the pull intensify, not physical, emotional, a promise of relief. I saw flashes of a future where I stood calmly at the door, welcoming travelers, guiding them inside without guilt or fear. A future where the house rewarded me with peace. It was tempting. Too tempting. That was how I knew it was a lie. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I ran. The house reacted instantly. The hallway stretched violently, doors slamming open as I passed. Footprints exploded across the floor, racing to intercept me. The copy followed, unhurried. There is nowhere to go, he called. I burst into the kitchen and skidded to a stop. The back door was open. Beyond it was not the yard. It was the crossing, the white void pressed against the threshold. Alive and waiting, I did not think. I jumped. The house screamed. The sound was not audible but absolute. A tearing sensation ripped through my chest as I crossed the boundary. The footprints shattered beneath me, scattering like broken glass. I fell hard into the snow. Behind me, the door slammed shut. The house retreated, but I felt something come with me. A thread, thin, burning. The connection was not broken. It had been stretched somewhere behind the white horizon. The house was already adjusting, and I was still part of its design. The crossing rejected me. That was the first thing I understood when I tried to stand. The snow beneath my hands burned with cold, sharper than before, as if the white expanse itself resented my presence. The thin thread I felt tethered to the house pulsed painfully in my chest, tightening every time I moved too far in any direction. I was not free. I was misplaced. Around me, the crossing had changed. The endless white was no longer smooth and quiet. It was scarred. Deep grooves cut through the snow like wounds, all of them pointing inward toward distant points I could not see, toward houses. I staggered forward, following no footprints of my own. They no longer formed for me. Instead, I felt pressure from the thread, tugging me subtly whenever I moved away from certain paths. The house was no longer guiding me gently. It was reeling me back. As I walked, the air grew denser, shaped Shapes moved beneath the snow, large and slow, creating ripples that traveled outward before settling again. I remembered the guides warning me. To refuse direction entirely is to erase yourself. I had refused alignment, not direction. Something noticed. The first sound came from behind me. Crunch, not the soft compression of footsteps. Something heavier. I turned. Footprints were forming in the snow. Not human. They were too wide, too deep. The impressions looked crushed rather than pressed, as if the snow had been forced to remember weight it could not contain. The collectors had found me. I ran. The snow fought me immediately, thickening around my legs, trying to slow me just enough. The thread burned hot now, yanking me sideways when I veered too far from its preferred course. The collectors moved effortlessly. I did not see them clearly. My mind refused to assemble their shapes properly. I caught glimpses of angles where curves should have been, limbs that bent the wrong way, shadows that arrived before the bodies that cast them. They were not guides. They were maintenance. The crossing needed balance. Lost pieces had to be returned or removed. I fell hard, my hands plunging into snow that felt suddenly deep and wet. I scrambled up just as one of the collectors passed through the space I had occupied. The snow collapsed inward behind it, leaving a hollow that sealed itself instantly. Erased, I ran toward the nearest structure I could see. A house. It was not mine. This one was smaller, squat, with a low roof heavy with snow. Its windows were dark. The front door stood ajar, swaying gently. Footprints led inside. I hesitated only a second. Then I crossed the threshold. The interior was wrong in a different way. This house felt abandoned rather than reset. Dust coated every surface. Furniture lay overturned. Scratches marred the walls, frantic and overlapping. Someone had tried to escape. The door slammed shut behind me. The collectors struck the exterior moments later. The walls bowed inward under immense pressure. The ceiling groaned. I backed into the center of the room, breath coming fast. Then I heard another sound. Breathing, human. From the corner, a man crouched there, eyes wide, hair matted with frost. He stared at me as if I were a ghost. "You should not be here," he whispered. I recognized the look. I had worn it once. "They are coming for you," he continued. "If they take you, you do not die. You get sorted." Sorted where, I asked? He shook his head violently. "Into paths, into walls, into directions." The house shuddered again. The man grabbed my arm. "You brought them here." I pulled free. I did not mean to. None of us do. The collectors breached the wall. White light poured through the cracks, swallowing shadow. The man screamed. Footprints appeared between us. Not mine. His. Leading away. The house chose. I understood too late. I ran as the collectors poured inside, the air tearing itself apart around them. I burst through a back door that should not have existed and fell once more into the snow. Behind me, the abandoned house folded inward, collapsing neatly, like a thought being erased. The thread burned brighter. The crossing was correcting its error, and I was still part of the problem. I did not stop running until the pain became background noise. The crossing stretched endlessly, but it no longer felt empty. Every direction carried weight now, as if the white itself had learned my outline and pressed closer because of it. The burning thread at my chest tugged and tightened, guiding me away from the collectors without letting me truly escape them. I followed the pull. That was the cruelest part. Even in defiance, I was still moving where something else wanted me to go. The snow ahead darkened, stained by shadows that did not belong to clouds. A structure emerged slowly, its outline stabilizing as I approached. It was my house, not a copy, not an echo. The original. I knew it the way you know your own name, even after forgetting everything else. The porch light glowed steadily. No flicker, no weakness. Footprints covered the yard in dense overlapping layers, far more than had ever existed before. They pointed inward from every angle, converging at the front door. I understood. The crossing was done improvising. It was ending this where it began. The door opened before I reached it. Warm air spilled out, carrying the familiar smell of pine and dust and old wood. For a moment, I almost stepped inside willingly. Then I saw the windows. Shapes moved behind the glass, not reflections. People. Dozens of them stood in the rooms beyond, pressed close together, faces slack, eyes unfocused. They did not look at me. They stared at the floor, at the footprints forming beneath their feet, stored, waiting. I stepped back. The copy appeared beside me, calm as ever. "You see now," he said. "This is efficiency." I clenched my fists. "You turned them into furniture, into structure," he corrected. The house hummed loudly, impatient. "You cannot break it." The copy continued. "You can only choose how you fit." I laughed bitterly. "You really believe that?" He looked at me then, truly curious. "You still think belief matters?" The front door widened, the interior stretching outward like a throat. Behind us, the snow shifted violently. The collectors were close. I felt the pressure from both sides, the pull of the house, the erasing weight of the crossing. I made a decision, not a path, a refusal. I ran straight at the copy. For the first time, he looked surprised. I hit him hard, shoulder first. We crashed onto the porch, rolling across the boards as footprints exploded outward beneath us. The impact sent a shock through the house. Windows shattered inward without sound. The porch light flickered wildly. The copy staggered back to his feet, expression sharpening. "You cannot hurt me," he said. "I do not need to." I grabbed his wrist. The burning thread flared. For a split second, I felt everything he felt. The alignment, the calm, the absence of doubt. Then I pulled. The copy screamed. The sound tore through the house like a fault line opening. The structure convulsed. Walls bowed. The roof cracked. Footprints reversed direction. I held on as the thread stretched impossibly thin, glowing white hot between us. The copy tried to pull free. I dragged him toward the threshold. The house resisted violently. The door slammed, reopened, slammed again. The porch boards splintered beneath our feet. Behind me, the collectors emerged from the snow, their distorted forms tearing holes in the white. I met the copy's eyes. "You said escape only goes deeper." I told him, "Then come with me." I crossed the threshold backward, dragging him into the crossing. The house screamed again. This time, It was afraid. The thread snapped. The force threw us apart. I slammed into the snow. Breath ripped from my lungs. The copy skidded across the white, tumbling end over end until he came to rest near a deep groove. The house recoiled, its image blurred, edges losing definition. Windows went dark one by one. The collectors froze. For the first time, the crossing was silent. The copy pushed himself upright slowly, staring at his hands. He looked confused. "Human, what did you do?" he whispered. I stood on shaking legs. "I gave you a choice." Footprints did not form between us. The path was gone. Behind us, the house collapsed inward, folding into itself with terrifying neatness. The white swallowed it. I did not feel relief, only the certainty that something fundamental had changed. The crossing no longer knew where I belonged, and that terrified it. Silence settled over the crossing like a held breath. Where the house had collapsed, there was nothing now. No debris, no shadow, just an absence so complete it made my eyes ache to look at it. The collectors remained frozen at the edges of the white, their distorted forms locked mid-motion, as if time itself had decided to reconsider. The copy stood across from me, shaking. He looked smaller than before, less certain. His breath fogged the air in short, panicked bursts, a sound I had not heard from him until now. "What happens next?" he asked. I did not know. That frightened me less than it frightened him. Footprints did not appear, not for either of us. The snow beneath our feet remained smooth and untouched, a state I had not seen since the first storm. The crossing was blind. I took a cautious step forward. Nothing resisted me. The burning thread that had anchored me to the house was gone. In its place was a dull ache, like a scar that had not finished healing. The copy watched my feet. "You broke the map," he said quietly. "Maybe," I replied, "or maybe I stepped off it." The collectors twitched. A ripple passed through the white, subtle but unmistakable. Somewhere beyond the horizon, something vast shifted again, more urgently this time. The crossing was waking up. We needed to move, not because a path demanded it, because stillness was no longer safe. I walked toward the nearest groove in the snow, one of the old channels carved by countless prior footprints. The surface there was thinner, less certain. When I stepped onto it, the snow sighed, settling beneath my weight. The copy followed hesitantly. We moved together through the crossing, not guided but watched. The collectors stirred slowly behind us, their frozen state cracking like ice under pressure. As we walked, shapes began to rise again. Not houses, something new. Fragments, door frames without walls, staircases that led nowhere, windows suspended in midair, showing brief flashes of rooms that no longer existed. The crossing was improvising, trying to rebuild direction from debris. The copy stopped abruptly. "Do you hear that?" At first, I heard nothing. Then a sound drifted across the white. Faint, familiar, Christmas music. A distant carol carried on non-existent wind. The melody warped and slowed, as if played on damaged tape. The crossing remembered. It always remembered. We followed the sound, drawn not by compulsion but recognition. Ahead, a new structure assembled itself piece by piece. Not my house. A church, small, wooden, snow piled high against its doors. Warm light glowed through stained glass windows depicting scenes of shepherds and stars. Footprints circled it, incomplete, as if waiting to be finished. The copy recoiled. "That place is dangerous," he said. I nodded. Places like that always are. We approached together. With every step, the collectors moved again, shaking free of their paralysis. The white behind us rippled violently, grooves deepening as direction tried to reassert itself. The church door creaked open. Inside, the air was warm. Candles flickered. A handful of people sat in pews, heads bowed, humming the carol softly. They looked peaceful. Too peaceful. I saw the truth immediately. They were aligned, not trapped, not afraid. Chosen. The copy trembled. "This is another ending," he whispered. "No," I said. "It is another beginning." As we crossed the threshold, the snow outside surged. Footprints formed rapidly, racing toward the church from every direction. The crossing had found a new anchor. I felt it then, the terrible choice. Break this place as well and scatter what little stability remained, or let it stand and become something worse. I looked at the copy. For the first time, he looked at me without superiority, without certainty. "What do we do?" he asked. I stepped forward into the aisle, and the carol rose, louder now, harmonizing with something vast beneath the floor. We were out of time. Whatever decision I made here would echo far beyond the white, and this time, no footprints would warn me where it led. The church did not welcome us. That became clear the moment we stepped fully inside. The warmth I had felt at the threshold faded quickly, replaced by a stale heaviness that clung to my lungs. The candles flickered lower, their flames bending away from us as if pushed by a wind that did not exist. The people in the pews continued humming. They did not look up. Their voices blended together into a single droning harmony, too precise to be human. I noticed then that none of them were breathing in time with the song. Their chests rose and fell out of rhythm, as if the melody were controlling them, rather than the other way around. The copy moved closer to me. "This place listens," he whispered. I nodded. I could feel it too. The church was not an escape from the crossing. It was a response to it, an attempt to replace paths with belief. I took a step down the aisle. The sound of my foot on the wooden floor echoed far too loudly. The humming faltered for a fraction of a second, then resumed, louder than before. Footprints appeared behind me, only one set. Mine. They pressed into the wood as if it were snow, shallow at first, then deeper. The church accepted me more readily than the house ever had. That terrified me. At the altar, a figure stood with their back to us. They wore simple robes, unmarked by frost or snow. Their posture was calm, reverent. When they turned, I saw that their face was blurred, features smoothed away like a statue left in the elements. "Welcome, Daniel Harper," the figure said. The copy stiffened. "It knows you," he said. "Of course it does," the figure replied. "Names are anchors." I felt the crossing stir outside the walls. "Restless. You are building something new here," I said. The figure smiled gently. "We are preserving what remains, Behind the altar, the stained glass windows shifted. The shepherds and stars rearranged themselves into spirals and branching lines that looked disturbingly familiar. Paths. You replace houses with churches, I said. You replace fear with faith. Faith is more efficient. The figure replied, it asks people to walk willingly. I thought of the people humming in the pews, their empty expressions, their perfect stillness. They chose this, I said. Yes, the word echoed like a benediction. The copy stepped forward. This is alignment without resistance, he said softly. Without violence. The figure inclined its head, and without deviation. I understood then why the house had collapsed so easily. It was obsolete. This was the next iteration. I felt the pressure building again, not from the walls, but from within my chest. A familiar pull, subtler than before. Kneel, the figure said. I did not move. The humming stopped. Every head in the pews lifted at once. Their eyes were open now, all of them looking at me. Footprints raced down the aisle, converging at my feet. The floor groaned under the weight of expectation. I thought of the choice before me. Break this place and unleash chaos, or let it stand and allow something worse to solidify. I looked at the copy. He was watching the figure with something like longing. You feel it too, I said. He nodded. Peace. That was the lie. Peace without freedom. I stepped forward, not to kneel, to speak. If this is faith, I said, then it needs doubt. The figure frowned for the first time. Doubt is erosion. So is fear, I replied. But you built everything on fear before. I reached out and touched the altar. It was warm, alive. The crossing screamed outside. The stained glass shattered inward, exploding into fragments of light. The people in the pews cried out as one, their song collapsing into chaos. Footprints spiraled wildly, losing cohesion. The figure recoiled. You do not belong here, it said. Neither do you, I answered. The copy grabbed my arm. What are you doing? Ending the shortcut. The church shook violently. The ceiling cracked. Snow poured in through ruptures in the walls. The white rushing back to reclaim the space. The figure dissolved into light. The pews splintered. The people vanished, leaving only empty coats on the floor. When the shaking stopped, the church was gone. We stood once more in the crossing. The white was unstable now, rippling constantly. The collectors stirred again. The copy stared at me. Shaken, you just destroyed something that could have stabilized everything. No, I said. I destroyed something that would have replaced choice. The thread did not return, but the silence that followed was heavier than any direction. The crossing was wounded, and it would respawn. After the church collapsed, the crossing began to bleed. That was the only word that fit. Thin cracks opened across the white surface beneath our feet, seeping darkness that spread slowly, deliberately, like ink in water. The air vibrated with a low-frequency hum that set my teeth on edge. The collectors moved again, not all at once. One by one, they rose from the snow at uneven intervals, their distorted forms snapping into partial focus as if the system was struggling to decide what they were supposed to be now. Some looked incomplete. Others flickered between shapes, maintenance routines without instructions. The copy stood close to me, his earlier confidence gone. He kept glancing around, as if expecting the ground itself to give him direction. "It is breaking," he said. "No," I replied, "it is recalculating." The crossing did not want freedom or faith. It wanted order. With both anchors destroyed, it needed something else to stabilize around. And I knew exactly what that would be. Me. The burning thread did not return, but I could feel the pressure building again, deeper than before. Not a tether this time. A gravity. We began to walk. There were no footprints guiding us, but the white subtly sloped, steering us toward a region where the cracks converged. With every step, the collectors adjusted their positions, forming a loose perimeter around us. Not a pursuit, an escort. Ahead, the snow thinned until it became translucent. Beneath it, I saw movement, countless impressions pressing upward from below, trying to become paths. The crossing was trying to grow a spine, a center. The copy stopped. "You know what it wants," he said quietly. I nodded. A singular reference point, a living anchor. He looked at me with something like fear. "You cannot let it use you." I almost laughed. "You already did." We reached the center. The snow vanished entirely, revealing a vast circular platform of compacted light and shadow. Symbols pulsed faintly across its surface, shifting constantly, never settling into one pattern. Footprints tried to form. They failed. The collectors ringed the platform, their presence heavy, expectant. The crossing spoke, not in words, in sensation. Pressure closed around my thoughts, compressing memories, emotions, instincts into something simpler. Direction without doubt, purpose without friction. I saw the future it offered. No houses, no churches, just paths, infinite paths radiating outward from a single point. From me, people would no longer wander. They would arrive knowing exactly where to go. Fear would be replaced by certainty, and certainty would erase resistance completely. I stepped onto the platform. The copy shouted my name. The moment my foot touched the surface, the crossing surged. Light flared outward. The cracks in the white sealed themselves. The hum deepened into something like satisfaction. Footprints exploded outward from the platform in every direction. Perfect. Uniform. The collectors stilled. The system had found its answer. Pain lanced through my chest as something rooted itself inside me. Not a thread, a foundation. I fell to my knees, gasping. Images flooded my mind. Roads in snow, doors opening, people stepping forward without hesitation. Entire lives redirected before doubt could form. This was worse than the house, worse than faith. This was inevitability. The copy approached cautiously. "Daniel, stop this." I looked up at him. "You feel it too," I said. He did not deny it. The pull was subtle but undeniable. "If you stay here," he said, "they will never escape. They will not want to." I replied. The truth tasted like ash. The platform pulsed again, urging completion. I realized then what the crossing could not calculate. Choice made without fear is not freedom, it is surrender. I forced myself upright. The pain intensified, the platform resisting my movement. The collectors shifted, uncertain. I reached out and grabbed the copy's hand. "Help me!" His eyes widened. "You want me to share it?" "No." I pulled him closer. "I want you to remember doubt." The moment our hands touched, something snapped, not physically. Conceptually, the perfect symmetry fractured. The footprint footprints wavered, their edges blurring. The platform shuddered. The crossing recoiled. The copy screamed as memories surged through him. Fear, guilt, hesitation. Everything alignment had stripped away. I screamed too. The collectors convulsed, their forms destabilizing violently. The platform cracked. Light and shadow tore apart, spilling upward into the white. We were thrown backward as the center collapsed in on itself. When the shaking stopped, we lay sprawled on raw snow. Footprints did not reform. The hum faded into a wounded silence. The crossing had lost its center. It was no longer stable, and now it was afraid. When the crossing fell silent, the silence did not feel empty. It felt attentive. The raw snow beneath us no longer shifted or resisted. It lay flat and dull, stripped of intention. The collectors had collapsed into inert shapes scattered across the white, their distorted forms sagging as if whatever animated them had withdrawn. The copy lay beside me, breathing hard. For the first time, his breath matched mine. That alone told me how deeply we had damaged the system. I pushed myself upright slowly. Pain flared and faded in strange waves, no longer centralized in my chest. Whatever foundation the crossing had tried to root inside me had failed to set. Around us, the horizon wavered, not breaking, reconsidering. The white dimmed gradually, losing its endless quality. Subtle gradients appeared, like distance returning after a long absence. You feel that the copy asked. I nodded. Limits. The crossing was shrinking. Without anchors, without paths, without a center, it could no longer justify infinite space. It was collapsing inward, not violently, but logically. We stood, no footprints formed. The snow accepted us without recording our movement. Ahead, something new emerged. Not a structure, a seam, a long, dark line stretching across the white. Like a wound sewn shut too hastily, it pulsed faintly, expanding and contracting with a rhythm I recognized. Breathing, the crossing was not dying. It was retreating. The seam widened. Beyond it, I glimpsed something impossible. Night, real night, stars, a sky that did not press down or watch. Earth. The copy stepped closer to the edge, awe and fear mixing on his face. Is that outside? He asked. I did not answer immediately. Outside meant rules, time, mortality. I had not existed under those constraints for a long time. The crossing did not want us to leave. The snow behind us began to ripple again, shallow waves rolling outward from the inert collectors. They were not reanimating. They were dissolving, breaking down into loose impressions that faded quickly. The system was shedding components it could no longer support. The seam widened further. Wind rushed through, cold and sharp in a way the crossing could never imitate. It smelled of pine and distant smoke. Winter, real winter. The copy turned to me. If we leave, he said, I do not know what happens to me. I studied him. He was no longer a copy in the way he had been. The alignment had burned away too much. What happens to anyone? I asked. He managed a weak smile. Fair enough. We approached the seam together. As I reached out, something tugged faintly at the edge of my awareness. A whisper. Not the house, not the crossing. memory. I saw flashes of footprints in fresh snow on a quiet suburban street, a locked front door, a porch light glowing on Christmas Eve. Someone else, somewhere else. The crossing was not finished. It did not need anchors anymore. It only needed stories. I pulled my hand back. The copy frowned. "What is it?" I looked at the stars beyond the seam. "If we go through," I said, "this place will scatter. Fragments will leak into houses, roads, winters. People will find footprints that should not exist." He swallowed. "But it will not be whole. No, it will be wounded." I stepped forward. The seam resisted slightly, like skin stretching before tearing. The crossing reacted, not with force, with desperation. Images flooded my mind, not of paths or houses, but of listeners, of people leaning closer to stories told in the dark, of belief forming without direction. I understood the final shape it wanted to take. Not a place, a narrative, something that lived wherever it was remembered. I looked back one last time at the white. The collectors were almost gone now, dissolving into nothing. The snow was flattening, erasing itself. I met the copy's eyes. "We will carry it with us," I said, "only as a scar." We stepped through. Cold slammed into us. Real gravity pulled me down. I stumbled and caught myself on frozen pavement. Street lights flickered overhead. Cars sat buried along the curb. A quiet neighborhood. Christmas night. I looked down. No footprints led to us. No footprints led away. The copy exhaled shakily. "We made it." I was not so sure. Far down the street, beneath a different porch light, something shifted in the snow. A single footprint pressed down, then another, and somewhere, someone was about to notice. We did not stay in the neighborhood long. The copy and I moved through the streets as quietly as possible, avoiding windows, avoiding light. The houses around us looked ordinary in the way only American suburbs can at night. Wreaths on doors, inflatable decorations half buried in snow, Christmas lights blinking out of sync. Normal, too normal. Every sound felt amplified. The crunch of snow under our boots, the distant bark of a dog, the hum of a power line overhead. Each noise made me expect the ground to respond. It did not. Not yet. We reached the end of the block and stopped. The copy leaned against a mailbox, breathing hard, staring back down the street we had come from. There were still no footprints behind us. That absence felt wrong. If the crossing had followed us fully, it would have left marks. If it had been destroyed completely, there would be relief. This was neither. This was latency. Someone is going to notice, the copy said quietly. I knew he was right. The crossing no longer needed anchors or paths. It had learned something better. It had learned patience. A car passed at the far end of the street, headlights sweeping briefly across the snow. In that instant, I saw something subtle shift near one of the houses we had passed. A shadow bent where it should not have. Then it was gone. We kept moving. As we walked, memories returned in fragments. My childhood home, my parents' voices, the feel of carpet under bare feet on Christmas morning. The crossing had stripped those things away to simplify me. Now they came back unevenly, like files restored from a damaged drive. The copy winced suddenly, clutching his head. It is loud, he said. What is stories? I stopped. I could hear it now too. Not voices, not whispers. Attention. Somewhere, someone was looking at snow and thinking about footprints, wondering how they got there, telling someone else the crossing was no longer a place. It was a question. We reached a small park at the edge of the neighborhood. The playground equipment stood frozen and abandoned, dusted with snow. A single streetlight cast a pale circle over the empty swings. Footprints appeared there, not ours, small, child-sized. They led from the swings toward the trees. The copy staggered back. It is already happening. I felt a deep, sinking certainty. The crossing was seeding itself through curiosity, through narrative, through the human need to explain the unexplained. We followed the small footprints to the edge of the park. They stopped abruptly at the tree line, vanishing as cleanly as if erased. No return trail. I looked up. Beyond the trees, I could see more lights. Another street, another set of houses, another story waiting to start. The copy laughed softly, a broken sound. We did not stop it. No, I said. We changed its shape. That might be worse. Snow began to fall again, light at first, almost gentle. The fresh flakes softened the ground, preparing it to remember new impressions. I understood then what my role had become. Not a guide, not an anchor, a witness, someone who knew what the footprints meant and what they could become. The copy met my eyes. What do we do now? I watched the falling snow. We wait, I said, and when someone asks if we have ever seen footprints appear where they should not, we tell them the truth. We tell them to lock their doors and to stop following paths just because they are there. Somewhere behind us, deep in the neighborhood, a door opened, a light flicked on, and a voice called out into the night, confused and afraid. Who is out there? The snow did not answer, but it listened. I am writing this because silence no longer feels safe. After that night, the copy and I separated. There was no argument, no dramatic farewell. We both understood that staying together would draw attention. Two men with the same face invite questions, and questions are the crossing's favorite entry point. I stayed. He left. I do not know where he went. Sometimes I think that is mercy. Life resumed its shape around me with unsettling ease. Streets were plowed. Decorations came down. People returned unwanted gifts and talked about weather instead of miracles. Snow melted, refroze, melted again. Normal rhythms. But the footprints did not disappear. They became subtle. I began to notice patterns, small reports buried in local news, posts on neighborhood apps, grainy photos shared with captions that tried to laugh things away. Anyone else see this? Footprints leading to nowhere. Probably a prank. Animals, maybe? They always stopped before doors. At first, I learned to recognize the early signs. Snow falling when the forecast said clear. Porch lights flickering once and then staying on. Dogs refusing to step outside. People lingering at windows longer than they should. I tried to warn them, not directly. That never works. Instead, I learned to interrupt. I knocked on doors before the footprints reached them. I salted sidewalks that did not need salting. I told people their lights were still on, that their gates were open, that they had left something outside. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it did not, because the crossing was no longer forcing anyone, it was inviting. On Christmas Eve, I saw the worst example yet. A family down the street had hosted a party. Laughter spilled from their house. Music played. Snow fell softly, perfect and undisturbed, until the footprints appeared. Dozens of them, adult-sized, child-sized, some overlapping, some hesitant. They circled the house like a thought that would not settle. I watched from across the street, heart pounding. Someone noticed. A man stepped outside, phone in hand, filming. "What is this?" he said, laughing nervously. The footprints shifted, not closer, clearer. They formed a path. The man hesitated. His wife called his name from inside. He took another step. I crossed the street without thinking. "Hey," I said, "your kids are looking for you." He turned, annoyed. "I do not have kids." The lie tasted bitter, but it worked. Confusion broke the moment. The footprints wavered. The path blurred. The man frowned, glanced back at the house, then at the snow. He stepped backward. The footprints faded. Relief nearly knocked me to my knees, but I knew better than to celebrate. Later that night, after the party ended and the house went dark, new footprints formed, fewer. Careful, they led to the back door. I did not knock this time. I watched from my window as the porch light flicked on by itself. The door opened. Someone stepped out. The snow accepted them. I did not see where they went. The next morning, police cars lined the street. A missing person. No signs of struggle. No tracks in the snow except the ones that should not exist. I gave my statement. I told the truth carefully, the way you do when you want to be believed. Just enough to be ignored. They thanked me. They left. The crossing did not. It has learned restraint. It has learned to wait for moments when people are already halfway gone. Lonely, curious, tired. I understand now why it will never be destroyed. It does not need houses or churches or anchors. It needs winters and people who believe that paths exist for a reason. I still check the snow every morning. I still interrupt when I can, but I am only one person. If you are reading this, I am asking you for something simple. When you see footprints in the snow that do not make sense, do not follow them. Do not film them. Do not wonder where they lead. Go back inside, lock your door, turn off the light, and let the snow forget. Because somewhere, something is listening, and it loves an ending where you take the first step. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.